So let's talk about the role of the leader in leading through this change, leading through this transition. And then Renee, we'll start with you and then go to Angie and then Reggie. How can the career civil servant better prepare for the upcoming changes brought about by the transition?
So I would begin with sort of some headlines associated with it. And your job as an executive is to provide guidance, governance, and guardrails. And that applies both to incoming individuals, whether it's an election-related transition to an executive position or election-related. And what you need to do, your role is to provide guidance to incoming and provide guidance to those that report to you. And you ask those that report to you to provide that guidance. And we talked about that previously, about sort of listening and communicating out. And that should have actually begun long before the election, because there's a lot of rhetoric and labels attached to federal employees in particular during an election. I would usually actually start the communication process right when it felt like election season was starting, which was just after everybody came back from summer vacation, and just start talking to them. They're not talking about you individually. These are folks with messages that are trying to get elected. So that begins actually long before the election, if this transition is related to the election. Your role is through that guidance, as well as to also steady the ship. Just breathe. We've been through this before. Share that you've been through this before. You still have to manage all the governance process as well. You come in day one after election, and it's business as usual. You need to do your job, deliver your job, and now be open to other people and how they might be feeling because of those results, if it's an election-related change in executives. And then with everyone that you report to and work with, you are responsible for integrity and ethics, and laws and regulations, as well as policies. So you are also the guardrail person, and that's to be able to provide advice to folks about what's ethically appropriate, what's the integrity part. Or if you're trying to make some policy change, you should also remember sort of the laws that are the foundation for your mission area, and make sure you understand what those guardrails are. So when folks that are new to your area are asking for things, and you're in a position to have either quiet conversations to illuminate and teach with them, and then listen on what is possible. And my final thing as a leader to anybody coming in is, please don't ever say to them, we've done that before. Please just listen to what they have to say and be agile and flexible. And the message to actually say to your people is, we've done this before, we will do it again, and we will do it again together.
Good advice. Angie, your thoughts on how to prepare for the upcoming changes?
Yes, one of the things that I was thinking about is, as Renee was talking, is, and it's something that I always used to kind of share with with both the politicals and honestly with the career staff too, is that in many ways, the career staff, we're running a marathon. And the political teams, when they come in, they're running a sprint. And even if it's not a political team and it's a new general that just came in to take over command, of an installation or something, or it's a new boss or whatever, they've got a sprinting mindset, whereas we have a marathon mindset. And I think sometimes we forget about the political cycle that a career civil servant actually goes through, right? And so when it first happens, it's go, 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 go. Hey, have you thought about this? Hey, what about that? My most favorite question, and Reggie probably can appreciate this, was, and it would always be, hey, Ange, have you ever thought about reforming hiring? Nope, never, ever thought about that. I am so glad that we're going to think about reforming hiring, right? And so that's kind of like an example of the first year. By the second year, what I've noticed is that the team, whether it's political or it's a new boss or whatever, they begin to understand that, hey, I don't really know everything about all of this. How about if I actually involve my career staff that's there? And how about if I kind of figure out, how does this budget process work? How do we get through all of these things, right? And then the third year, we're kind of tired of them and they're tired of us. I mean, let's be realistic, right? And so by the third year, and things start changing out and everything, and we're starting to get really kind of tired because we've got to push all these initiatives through on that final sprint. And then the fourth year, where it's kind of a little chaotic, right? Because folks are leaving and folks are coming in, and you just have all of this chaos that's kind of going on. And amongst all of that, you're still trying to balance, honestly, still getting your mission done, still trying to figure out what the priorities are and how to maintain the institution, if you will, right? The institution of government. You're still trying to not figure that out. You're still trying to actually make that happen, while also at the same time pushing forward as many of the political or your new boss's agenda as you possibly can, because it's a balancing act of trying to get all of those things done. So I hope I didn't go off topic too much, but I just think it's really important for us to talk about what the cycle is like for a career, because it's not just these 75 days or 70 days in between election and inauguration. It's a 4-year cycle of things that go on that I think we're continuously dealing with, especially those of us who have been through multiple transitions.
Yeah, great advice, Angie. There certainly is that ebb and flow, although I was envisioning myself running a marathon for the 4 years while you were telling me about that ebb and flow, and I was a little bit tired listening, but that's
Exactly.
okay. That's all right. Reggie, your thoughts on preparation for upcoming changes?
Angie, excellent, excellent imagery. Yeah, I guess my thoughts really do center on an experience I had some years ago where it was the beginning of my Chico career at Social Security, and I was there for 15 years, and I was invited to a private sector event for newly minted VPs mostly. And I was the only one there representing government because my commissioner wanted me to be a part of it. And I remember them checking in with me periodically to see if the topics were relevant. And I felt put down a little bit because it was like, well, you're from the public sector. None of this probably is of relevance to you. Until that final day, I really got my revenge in that they were covering acquisitions, takeovers, corporate takeovers. And I raised my hand and I said, you know what? This is one of those places where you might want to seek guidance from government. We go through transitions every 2 to 4 years, and we know how to deal with change. Now, it isn't always, easy to do. It isn't always pleasant to do. But the reality is change is constant for us, and we adapt to it pretty well. And that's one of the reasons I love public service and public servants, because they do keep the real thing on a day-to-day basis as they are serving the American public. That oath of office makes a tremendous difference to us. And I remember one of my earliest experiences in getting wisdom from a sage executive was, if it's not illegal, immoral, and unethical, do your job, do what you're supposed to do. Renee talked about the guardrails. We are the guardrails. Now, some people will ignore the guardrails and go right over the edge of the mountain, but most do learn how to take our advice. In my experience, all incoming politicals are skeptical about what they're going to find when they hit the ground running. And what's been remarkable to me is that at the end of their tenure, they all say, thank you for the service that you provided me, sometimes the way you helped me from, doing the wrong thing or not understanding what the important thing was to do here. And I agree with Renee, never ever say we tried that, it didn't work, but you might want to let them know that, perhaps that's an approach whose time has come. Things evolve. We are not in a static world. And everybody has the potential to bring in new ideas that can be minted and utilized. And so part of our task, part of our challenge is to figure out how to do what needs to be done the right way. And so both Angie and Renee and you, Sally, have talked about the importance of maintaining the integrity of the service and the integrity of public service for the American public. And I think that's what we're always committed to do.
Thanks, Reg, and thanks to the three of you. I want to add a couple of things before we talk about the role of the leader through any significant change such as this. One, the advice I often give to the career folks is get your program in order. As I believe it was Angie who said, most of what we do is not going to change. The federal government is going to be processing Social Security checks, and as an aside, I thank you for mine. Processing Medicare requests, processing VA kinds of services and what have you. And so what I often suggest to people is before your new leadership comes in, make sure that your program is in order. The other thing I suggest to career folks is, start familiarizing yourself with the new administration's priorities and goals. This will give you a pretty good feel for what those new policies might be, and it'll give you time to think about the impact those policies have on your programs even before the new leadership shows up. So again, as you think about preparing yourself. I want to ask about the role of the leader during the transition before we jump into the notion of how do we navigate some of these more complex and crucial conversations. But let's stick with the role of the leader. And Angie, we'll start with you before we go to Reggie and Renee. What do you see are some best practices for leading through current transition period? And for that matter, any significant change? Talk to us a little bit about the role of the leader in the midst of these changes.
The number one role of the leader is to remain calm, right? And to really be able to help keep the emotions of the organization, of the employees, to just keep that ship as steady as you possibly can. Because as change and chaos and things are going on around you, and it happens every day, it doesn't have to necessarily be a presidential transition. It can be a cyber attack, that happens. It can be that something that you cared about deeply that Congress chose not to fund it. I mean, it can be all kinds of things. So the role of the leader is to keep the team as motivated as possible and to help them understand that sometimes things don't go the way that we plan. Sometimes we got to have plan B. Sometimes it's plan C. But at the end of the day, that we're in this together and that we'll figure out our way through this and that we can navigate this storm. But we can navigate it together, right? And it kind of reminds me of when COVID happened and stuff, and we all got sent home, and we're all trying to figure out how to do all of this stuff. What I noticed is those teams that had already had really good established relationships were able to work their way through COVID with no problems at all. Those teams that were brand new or didn't have strong leadership or didn't get along, they still struggled. They struggled whether they were at home or whether they were at work. And so I think placing an emphasis as a leader on the relationships, in addition to the mission that you're trying to accomplish, regardless of when things are happening, is one of the most important things you can do. I remember I had to, talk about the cyber breach that happened at OPM when I was the COO there. And one of the things that I always tell the folks that I'm talking to is you cannot establish your relationships in the middle of a crisis. You have to have those relationships established well before the crisis or the chaos is going to occur. And so that's really kind of my biggest message. All throughout my career, the best thing that has happened to me is the relationships that I built with people, because that's whenever you feel the strength of the team of getting through just about anything.
Cool. Great advice. Great advice. Reg, your thoughts on the role of the leader during any significant change?
This is one of those, places where I really would emphasize for people the importance of being emotionally intelligent, honing those skills, empathy, being able to see, I think Renee alluded to it, what are people feeling? Because not everyone's feeling the exact same thing. Transitions are, as I alluded to earlier, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous processes. And so people have to keep their eye on the prize of leading well each and every day. Being authentic, Renee alluded to being vulnerable, not retreating into some lonely place where you're trying to get through it all by yourself. Sally, you alluded to those people who you can draw on for their prior experience to all of this. And the point you made about getting your act together, leaders have to be self-critical. They have to understand that they're preparing for something that they don't know all the answers to, but they have tried and true approaches to being ready for what, as Angie's alluding to, what may come that you never anticipated. All of us, particularly those who have served in these leadership executive capacities for a while, have dealt with coup, and one of the things that you're dealing with there and continuing the work is being that anchor in the storm, and being someone that everybody can look to when everybody else is bouncing off walls. You're not, you're remaining calm. A friend of mine joking with me who likes to rib me said, you're the barely breathing type. And that gets back to the point of, you get trained as a civil servant not to panic, because you're in a position to have to serve and represent others and deliver when all else is going to hell in a handbasket around you. And so being steady in that time is essential.
Good advice, Reg. Renee?
Yeah, so I'm going to boil this down to a federal acronym. Why not? We're all so used to it. I would say the acronym is CAN, and it stands for communicate, up, down, sideways, accountable. In all of this, you are accountable for program and/or project results. Keep on delivering and keep going, and be able to communicate in a good storyline about your program, not just data, but be able to tell the story about the impact of your angle of the mission that you're delivering. And the N is navigate. Your role is to navigate the incoming set of executives, as well as help your people navigate through the change as well. So it's communicate, accountability, and navigation. And yes, you can.
Cool. Thanks, Renee. And before we go to the next set of questions, let me add a couple of things. I alluded to before that any change, that the number one fear people have is the fear of the unknown. And my advice to senior leaders is to sit with the staff and say, I'll tell you what I know, I'll tell you what I don't know. And if you folks hear any rumors, come and see me and I'll track them. And this way, what we're trying to do, as Angie alluded to, is lower the temperature in the room. So that's certainly another piece of advice that I often give to leaders.